Chapter 8, Tea for Three. But the next day, as if by design, Red and the boys planned to continue their scheming were thwarted. Red was sitting in her 5th period class, History of Tea Parties, when a courier from the Queen's Castle appeared at the door. "Message for you, my lady," he said, bowing snappily and delivering a sealed envelope. Red's cheeks burned from being singled out, and she knew every student in class would have been looking her way if they weren't compelled to stare straight ahead, perfectly still in their seats. Then she thought of what she, Ace, and Chester had talked about last night, and almost wished they would whisper, do anything against the grain. Red shook her head and opened the letter. Inside was a scrawled note in her mother's hand. "Red, darling, I'm in a panic realizing how close the tea is and how much we still must do. I've called in some backup and have notified the school that you're excused from classes from 5th period onward, beginning today. Please head home as soon as you get this. Hearts and kisses, Mother." Red felt her fingers tighten around the parchment as she resisted the urge to rip the letter. Royal training time had doubled, and she'd missed both History of Tea Parties and croquet for the next 2 weeks. This was not what Red had signed up for. In fact, she hadn't signed up for any of it. But Red recalled their party, their real party, once more, and it strengthened her resolve. The more she could keep her mom off the scent until the preparations were complete, the better chance they had at success. It was still begrudgingly that Red packed up her books and slipped out of the classroom. She paused in the hall, wondering if she could get a message to Chester, but she wasn't sure which class he was in, and she had no idea how to get in touch with Ace, as much as she might have liked to. Red shook her head. As she started on the forest path, the thought had come to her unbidden. She didn't have the time or energy for a crush, and the Queen would put a swift end to any relationship of that nature with someone who was a commoner, a homeschool one at that. The Queen of Hearts often crowed that there was no better discipline and education than at her own Wonderland High, which she'd both founded and funded. Red assumed her mother would be quicker to accept a relationship between Red and one of the courtier's children, or someone of noble blood. But in truth, Red suspected it would be just one more thing her mother would disapprove of her doing. The Queen of Hearts often emphasized that she couldn't trust anyone, and Red was certain this extended to any ostensible love interest. She sometimes wondered if it extended to daughters. When Red arrived in the ballroom, there were 2 new faces there to greet her. She recognized both girls as recent graduates of Wonderland High, who were now apprenticed in the Queen's court, learning to be ladies of nobility who spent their days listening or sitting in parlors and looking displeased. The first was Red's height, with a plump face that Red was sure would have looked cheerful if it wasn't pulled into a frown. Her light blonde hair was styled in a tight, complicated updo that looked rather uncomfortable. The other was much shorter, with a timid, mousy disposition and chestnut hair. Both girls were dressed in attire that was nearly as outlandish as the Queen's, black and white silks accented with reds. "Darling, you're here!" the Queen cried when she caught sight of Red. "Wonderful! I'd like you to meet these 2 young women of the court, who will assist in your coaching. Miss Twee and Miss Dora, daughter of Dormouse." Twee curtsied, and Dora gave a polite, cursory smile that showed her 2 front teeth. "Hi," Red said, wary of these additions. Over the course of her life, she had learned that the closer people were to her mother, the more awkwardly they treated Red. This was being further proven by Chester and Ace, boys who had spent their lives far from the castle. Red had felt like a normal person with the 2 of them last night. "Good afternoon, Princess Red," the 2 young women chorused. Red nodded at them. "Just Red is fine. I have so many things to plan," the Queen of Hearts continued. "Caterers to call, talking with the groundskeeper, sirs. So Twee and Dora will get you started today. You're not even going to be here? I'll come back to check on your progress very soon, the Queen assured her. She pecked a kiss on Red's forehead, and then the look came back to her face. Frog boys, she yelled, calling her butlers. I need 7 rolls of parchment now. As Red's mother strode from the room, Twee and Dora moved to the tea table that was set up for practice. They sat delicately, backs ramrod straight and elbows off the table. Twee-eyed Red patted the empty place setting, gesturing for her to come over. Red sighed and sat, taking her napkin and unfolding it in her lap. Try again, Dora sniffed. I'm sorry, Red said. The fold, Twee pointed at Red's napkin. It should be facing you, and then you should unfold it all the way. Red paused and looked at them both to see if they were joking. If they were, it was perfectly deadpan. Would anyone even notice that at the ceremony? Red asked. Oh, you'd be surprised, Twee raised her eyebrows. The kind of reprimand I'd get from my mother if I did it your way. Ugh. Now, Dora said, say they're serving oysters. Oysters from Briny Beach. Which fork would you use? I don't really care for oysters, Red said. In fact, she thought they were disgusting. Can we use a different example? No. Red scanned her place setting. There were smaller plates stacked on larger ones, bowls and silverware of all sizes. Dora and Twee had the same. She'd seen such place settings before. The Queen of Hearts loved having fancy dinners, and they often had guests in the grand hall. Red's mother was strict about everything, including table etiquette. The fact that she had brought 2 Wonderland High alums in as coaches told Red just how important this tea ceremony was supposed to be. The Queen was very keen on appearances, of course, but it seemed her mother also believed this would be a critical moment in Red's political career. Hazarding a guess, Red picked up the smallest fork, which she felt was the most oyster size. Lucky guess, Dora said. And salad? Said Twee. There were 2 other forks on the opposite side, one large, one small. Big salad leaves were hard to pick up. Red reasoned, so she chose the larger of the 2 utensils. Wrong, Dora crowed. The waiter brings sorbet. Twee jumped in. The more guesses Red missed, the slyer their grins got. What do you use? Red tried not to roll her eyes. She knew enough to recognize the dessert utensils at the top of her plate, but sorbet was a silly question. Surely either the fork or the spoon could be used, she said. It's sorbet. Twee and Dora dissolved into little fits of snickers. Hardly, Dora said. It's a spoon. Always a spoon. Red sighed long and hard, not trying to hide her exasperation. She thought of Chester and Ace, probably off in the woods somewhere wondering where she was. I know you're trying to help, and I know there's a certain way to do these things, but I don't see how any of this matters. Though the place settings were for show, there was real tea in the fine china cups and a pot steaming in the middle of the table. Twee plucked a cube of sugar from the sugar bowl and stirred a little cream into her tea. Tell me, Red, she sipped from the cup. You're being groomed as a leader. That part is a given. But do you want to be respected as a leader? Well, Red knitted her brow. What if I don't want to be a leader at all? Dora rolled her eyes, somehow managing to make it look dainty. That's not an option. Why not? Said Red. Your mother decreed it, Dora sniffed. Her word is law. You're going to be a leader, Twee repeated. Do you want it to be respected or mocked? Never taken seriously? Respected, I guess, Red said slowly. Twee and Dora exchanged a look. Then Twee continued. For better or worse, Wonderland is built on perfection. Discipline. If you want to be respected, you have to adhere to whatever customs are most important to Wonderland perfectly. People will be watching, Dora added. Wonderland is good at hiding that because correct conduct also means perfect allegiance. But no one comes under more scrutiny than royals. We see everything that goes on with you and your mother. Red felt a curl of foreboding in her stomach. She and Chester had joked about the Queen, and Red was no stranger to the fact that her mother wasn't very popular. But Tweet and Dora hinted that even the advisors and ladies of the Queen of Hearts court, whom Red had thought were the closest thing her mother had to friends, disliked their ruler. Disliked her very much, perhaps. The Queen had always seemed oblivious to criticism, or at least far above caring about it, but she had to sense it, didn't she? And those same ladies and courtiers, all of Wonderland, in fact, might dislike Red too, at the first wrong step she took. So, Dora trilled, let's move on to the soup course.